So our final headline speaker today is a first in more ways than one. She's the first speaker we've had who works exclusively in digital, and she's also the first doctor of social media in the UK. As CEO of Disruptive Insight, the social intelligence consultancy, she helps brands to cut through the noise and clutter of the digital world. And when she's not doing that, she lectures at the University of Strathclyde on digital marketing and social media. Here to explain how we can make our online content more influential and engaging, please welcome Dr. Jillian Ney.
Thank you very much. I have to say that I slightly changed the title of my presentation. And I forgot to tell the guys, it was a little while ago when I've submitted all of this. So we've changed it slightly to Storytelling from Social Intelligence. Just a slight pivot in that, but it's good to be here. Now, I've been really nervous coming here today. I had two clients trying to meet with me this morning, and I had to tell them I'm going to a conference, and they're saying, Jillian, where are you going? And I said I was coming here to a copywriting conference, and they said, why are you going there? And I was just like, I'm going to speak. I'm not going to attend. I'm going to speak. And they're just like, no, Jillian. And I was like, why not? They're going, you're a really shit copywriter. And I am. I'm terrible. It's not for me. So I've been really, really nervous. So it has been a fabulous morning. When I was coming down on the train, I was watching Twitter and seeing all the comments. So I don't want to kill it. And I'll not. So please bear with me. I know nothing about copywriting, but I can tell you a bit about what I know and how we think that we help copywriters and marketers and other business people as well. So this is me. As Tom said, I'm the first doctor of social media. Now, I said before, I don't like social media, and I still don't really like it. I use it, I make my living from it, and I can help other people with it, but I'm not one of these people that are running up in the street and I get people coming to me, I love social media. I'm just like, what do you like about it? And they don't really know. I know what I like about it, but I don't really like the mechanism of it. So this was when I was at TED, and I was saying, as individuals, we all have an innate desire to connect. It's a desire built into every single one of us, and that's where my work stems from. It's understanding how it works and how we connect. So my PhD really looked at how we use social media in a purchase decision and how we evaluate the credibility of that information online. So I looked at basically how we go through a purchase journey, and then what types of information we're receiving from that and how we evaluate the influence of that information. I then turned that into a model for someone, an agency I worked in consultancy for. But I didn't really like how they then manipulated the model to make it from coming from words, from the context of social media into the numbers. And at that point I decided nobody really gets this in the way that I want, because all of these people, they've been marketers and they've been in their area for a long, long time. They're set in their ways, they're traditional. And I went to set up my own company to do things my way and to work with people who want to experiment and who want to change and who want to adapt to this social world. So I started Disruptive Insight. So we say that we transform digital noise into valuable insight for business. So if somebody mentions something somewhere, apart from privacy settings, of course, I can generally get it and analyse that, and I have that with a researcher head on. So I'm not a marketer, remember, and I get to go in and dive in and find all the different insights in the consumer behaviour and the change pieces within that. So one of the things before I started Disruptive Insight was I did a bit of consultancy work for a tech company, and I went in to research how they should evolve their platform. And as part of that piece, I spoke to quite a lot of their current customers, and their customers were coming back and telling me, we use it, but we don't know why we use it, and we don't really know what you do. I was like, right, okay, but you still come. And they was just like, yeah, we still come, but none of the messaging is right. So I said, I'm not a copywriter, guys. Let's bring in some copywriters. So what we wanted them to be able to do was to make the consumer feel an attachment to the brand. They did use it, but they just didn't know why, and they couldn't articulate that. And we wanted them to act on that feeling. So they had a bottleneck in users coming onto the platform, and we wanted to be able to accelerate that as well. So it was quite a big project, in my opinion. And we got a copywriting team to come in. And what they were saying, we need to get this brand identity down. So what I did today is I had a look at what brand identity actually means. And it's what we want our brand to mean. It's not anything else, it's what we want the people to see. And that didn't really strike true with me, and it still doesn't strike true with me. Now, the process that the copywriters took for us to be able to, who are the brand, I was brought in as a consultant, so I didn't build it, and I didn't shape the communication strategies, and I was a researcher as well, so it wasn't my thing. The copywriters came in, and we had 3 different copywriters because each of them failed. And every single one of them took us through a process where we had to do a day with them, and we would go through and we would talk about the brand and what the brand meant to us, like a focus group, and there was other elements, and then they took away all their notes, and then they came back with something. Now, when the issue has been us, I didn't think that was the right way to solve that problem, and this is why my company looks externally to what other people are saying within the wider environment to bring that back in. So all of these 3 copywriters, unfortunately for us, they didn't quite nail what we looked for them to do. Now, it was a Scottish product, and what happens with Scottish products is people try to traditionally make them all bells and whistles and Scottish tartan and everything else, and that's not what we were wanting to do. We were wanting to be a new Scotland, but we kept on coming back to this old identity because that's what was in people. So unfortunately it didn't work, and we actually turned to the technology platform to be able to understand how it should be positioned, and we got the answer from there. So it's a slight iteration of what I now do for other people as well. So the issue for me, from coming from that perspective where it was getting the brand to go through what the issue was and to try and solve that themselves, is we had a very different idea of what the brand was to what other people had the brand was, and what people within that general market space thought about that particular market. And this is a very, very famous quote from Jeff Bezos from Amazon. Your brand is what other people say about you when they're not in the room. Social media is one vehicle of being able to understand what that is. And my other piece here is that sometimes we create something, but someone else finds a different meaning from it. People, if you go to Silicon Valley, people are talking about pivoting all the time because what you've built hasn't worked and you've got to pivot it slightly. Twitter was never created for what it is used now, neither was Instagram, I believe. So they've had to twist it slightly to make it work. And it's exactly the same thing. So I may have a brand, you may have a brand, but other people, and you have your brand identity, but other people might be inferring a different meaning to that, and we need to understand what that is. So where social intelligence comes in, just to give an example, so we've got BMW. So what this particular case study did, it looked at how BMW position themselves. Does anybody know how BMW position themselves when they're advertising, when they're writing copy?
Driving experience.
Pardon?
It's the driving experience.
The driving experience, yep. So we've got speed and we've got global engineering, okay, which is pretty traditional for BMW, thank you very much. But when we went to look at what the customers were saying about them, it was the family aspects of the car that was more important to them. So there's a slight disconnect in the types of information that they're looking for there, and which is quite a big discrepancy really when you're talking about speed, but we're actually looking at the family aspect of a car, and when you've got a family, you're looking for security, not necessarily speed. That's one example. So what we need to do is create relevance for that particular group. I dare say that there's going to be other different groups of people which speed and performance is essential for them. But when we went to look at the social conversation, the predominant language that was being used was about the family aspects of the car. So what we think and what I believe is that we need to start creating relevance because we're competing for a lot of attention, and especially in social media. Last year, on average, there was 5,700 tweets per second sent. When I was coming down on the train today, I checked it, and it was 7,700 tweets per second that had been sent when I checked that. So how on earth are you going to create? How are you going to cut through all of that noise? That's a massive amount of noise. One of the things that I think is because it's getting bigger and bigger and so much louder, everybody has a voice. Maybe nobody listens to that voice, but what might happen is that it could get very, very boring. And there's all these different voices screaming for attention. Which one do you listen to? In the terms of the brands, this was taken from Brandwatch, and they specifically looked at Twitter. It was only 3.6% of all social noise on Twitter had a brand name in it. so what else are the people talking about? Because they're not all talking about brands, and it's not all made up by brands talking about themselves. There's a whole big, massive area of that where people are just having conversations. That's where my work sits. We do the stuff with the brands, but we also have a look at these other conversations to find the relevant pieces of information and the relevant behaviours and interests in the way that they speak to help brands position their communications effectively. So how can we cut that? I've just covered that. So the academic part, I'll not go into too much because I'm quite conscious of the time and how many more slides I've got going on. So you've heard lots and lots about this morning about how we process information and about nudging behaviour and all sorts of different things. We only ever truly fully process information when the information is relevant to us and when it catches our attention. And to be able to do that, you need to have some kind of relevance there, and so we need an involvement, and it needs to be relevant. So when you come through all of that, this is this is what I believe how we can help brands. So gaining relevance through social intelligence. So what we try to do is understand what the audience, now I specifically not mention customer here because again going back to the 3.6%, there's so many more people there, so we need to know what the particular audience discusses. What do they talk about? How do they talk? And how understand the emotions driving that engagement for them. So by doing that we can create relevance, connection, and we can nudge their behaviour. So what we do is we seek context. Now I'm going to go into a few different case studies we've been working on just now. The first one is from the independence referendum debate. We've been doing a lot of work in this to understand what was being spoken about. Now after every live televised debate, and during it, Twitter put something out that looked like this. So here's a buzz chart of tracking the conversation. So at this point here, the Trident missile system was debated, and they've got other points throughout there saying what was being debated on television at that point. And they were equating what was being spoken about to what was actually being talked about in Twitter. But that's not the case. And this was reported in the BBC, and it was reported in other different traditional publications saying, here's when it happened, here's how many tweets per second were coming through, and this is what they were talking about. But when we went back in and analysed the context of that data and what they were actually talking about, it didn't always match what was going on here. In fact, what we found is that the majority of the conversation surrounding that debate was about the poor quality of the debate. But nobody else got that, and it wasn't reported in the paper or anything like that. And it was a massive percent of the conversation, and it was down to them shouting at each other. It was down to the audience shouting. There was lots and lots of different elements of that there that contributed to that. It wasn't about the Trident missiles. It wasn't about the bedroom tax. I can't remember what they said, because Facebook came out and they said, here's the top 3 things or top 5 things that were discussed, but we didn't find them in that order either. So our top one was the poor quality of the debate. The next one was the currency, which was a big one. And it was going on about lots and lots and lots of different things. But Alex Salmond was getting laid into quite a lot for that one. And then oil was the second one, and then it was the BBC that was actually getting laid into for that one because they had not given out a particular part of information. So there's lots of different things going on in there. I'll just go back to that. So we've got these 3 specific areas. So what we do is that's a general area, and you can go in and anybody can find that. So all you need to do is you go in and you see how many posts have that particular thing, and someone will go, right, okay, so it's been mentioned 396 times, another one's been mentioned 245 times. Here you go, here's your top few things that have been mentioned. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't mean anything to anybody. It's only a number. This is why I hate numbers. It's only a number. So what we do is we go in to have a look and see what the context behind that is, to then help them position a communication around about that. So we wrote a blog after this, and it was one of the longest blogs I've probably ever written since my PhD, and it had so much insight in it. And we were saying that if someone comes in to analyse this from a political party, they know then how to position the next lot of statements, because they know what the electorate is wanting them to answer. They know where they failed before, and they now know what to do and how to solve that. That's where we come in, and that's where I think social intelligence is going to have a good part to play in the future. So this was from another case study we did looking at context. Can you remember when the World Cup was here and the England shirt was launched? and there was a massive outcry because it was a £90 shirt. We went in, because Nike didn't really handle that very well, and we went in to have a look to see what the chat was about, because everyone was going on about, they're talking about this. What about the people, now I might be wrong here, I'm thinking it was Bangladesh where the shirt was made. These people are only paid 2 pence a day, whatever it was, and the media was making a big play on that. But when we go in and look at social media, that's not what was being discussed within social media. So the papers had one view, and then the general public had another view. So there's a disconnect there between what's going on in the traditional press as to what is actually important to us. So that's another part that we looked at. So what we looked at was the content shared, so that's retweets and including links from traditional news articles, which nobody re-engineered. So you just basically, you read a news article, you went and you hit tweet, and it populates what is being said. That was that. So we look at that, and that's just recycling of content. And what we also look at is we look at this original content. So that's my voice and your own ideas and your own thoughts coming out and what they actually are. So we went in to analyse what the original content was to find out what the people were looking for. And it came down to two areas. It came down to price and design, and they were very much related to each other. The price rip-off, the way it was positioned. When we went in to look at the data in slightly more detail, we found that £90 was just for one shirt. There was other shirts underneath that, and if Nike have had a lead with those other shirts, then this would never have happened to that extent, because they were on the same price point as what the other countries were. Then there's the design here. We've got, now I don't know his name, but this is a guy from Soccer AM. Don't know if anybody watches that. He had made his own Nike shirt with a £2 Primark number, and then drew on it and cut a few holes in it. And this went viral, and that was made up of the bulk of the conversation that was going round. It was shared a lot of times. Positive points to do with it was the fact that it was made out of recycled bottles, but it was only 1% of the overall conversation to do with the shirts at all. That didn't break through, and Nike was trying to play upon these points to try and gain back a slight bit of the conversation, going, it's made out of recycled bottles, that's why it's so expensive. It's an exact replica of what the guys in the England team are wearing, that's why it's so expensive, instead of talking to us in our own language and finding out what the issues were and trying to address them properly, instead of playing the party line. That's just a bit more about the results there. So moving on from that, I said it already, it's like understanding the language, and I think that's came in quite a lot today, is understanding how other people talk. When we went to do the IndieRef stuff, I've never engaged in politics before, because I just don't like the way that they speak. And I find it really difficult to find that public school boys can run a country that's made up predominantly in Scotland of working class people. I find that really strange, because we don't have the same ideals, we don't come from the same background, we don't have the same money, that kind of thing. So what we were doing within the IndieRef stuff as well was understanding how these people spoke. And that would help, again, inform a strategy for ongoing, because it's one thing for Alex Salmond or Alistair Darling to stand up there and give us a line, but if it's not actually reaching the audience, then they've not answered the question properly. And then I did notice later on in the campaign, when David Cameron came to speak, he had a sticker behind him and it said, "Let's stick together." And I thought, someone's been listening and going in and having a look at how we speak, because it had never came out before, I'd never seen it before, it was only within the last week, and it was this "let's stick together." I said, someone's been listening. So one of the projects that we had to work for in understanding language was how to create a hashtag that was meaningful to female runners. I have to say that during this project, I'm not allowed to run because I had an operation on my feet. But immersing myself in their culture and understanding how they spoke and the emotion that the female runners have, I was signed up for a 10K that I can't do. So when people say that social media is not persuasive, if you look at it long enough and you look at the emotion instead of the numbers, it blooming well is. I'm meant to run tomorrow morning, but that's not going to happen. So what we did is we had a look to see how these runners spoke, and we did it a bit. I'm going to speak about emotion next, but we did have to look at the emotion to be able to create this hashtag that would allow them to appeal to the female runner. Now this is just a wordle of some of the words that kept on coming up. So we've got things like enjoyment, self-esteem, happy, joy, diet. We've got exhilaration. The one that's not there that couldn't fit on was confidence. We've got excitement. We've got glow, pride. So there's quite a lot going on there, and there's quite a lot of really, really, really positive emotions coming out of that. I think that's what made me want to run, is to be able to clear my head and to feel that exhilaration and achievement and self-esteem after I had finished it. So what we did, we had a look at all of this, and we managed to come up with running high as the hashtag for that particular campaign, because it fitted in with what other people were saying, and it within the emotion and the language that these runners used. It was used slightly. So what we do is when we try to make up hashtags is we have a look to see how the hashtag is being currently used as well, because we do not want to have an incident on our hands. I don't want to be responsible for that. And it was already being used very, very positively, and it was only being used by, I think it was like 95% was females and only 5% of males were using it. So it was a very, very female-focused hashtag. And these are some of the images that were coming up from that. So again, just going on a little bit now to understand the emotion and the drivers for it. To understand the emotion that drives, sorry, I made a mistake, that drives the engagement. Have you ever seen this before? So this is the wheel of emotion. And there's various base emotions, and then everything else comes out from that. There's been a lot of emotional work being carried out, and I hear it's becoming more and more prevalent within the advertising community as well, to be able to make that connection and make the consumer feel something. So there's lots of different things here. So we've got joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. So there's quite a lot going on within there. Now, you're going to look at me and you're going to go, how on earth do you get that from social media data? Because there's because nobody's going to really use joy constantly. There'll be other derivatives of the word. So it becomes quite a complex way to go in to understand that emotion. And we've managed to go in and we work with other partners who've made an algorithm to have a look at this. And we're working on our own stuff as well, to go in to make sure so we can see what's happening. Now, the case that we have for this is Samsung. So what happened is that you just search for Samsung, and everybody that's mentioned Samsung within the given period comes back if you've not got your privacy settings on. So what happens is you get a lot of stuff from Twitter, but you don't get as much from Facebook, because generally people have that locked down, and if they don't, they should. Particularly my students, which, yeah, but trying to tell them that is like talking to a brick wall. So what was happening with Samsung? What was coming out with joy? So does anybody use a Samsung phone? Or, yep, what do you like about your Samsung phone? What gives you joy? that it works. Okay, what was coming out from these conversations was the keyboard.
I would not put that down as joyful.
When we went to analyse the conversations, it was the keyboard that was coming out, as well as the emojis. People really like an emoji. So what we were thinking here with this is that, depending on what your task is for that particular piece that you're doing, if you're wanting to go in and reinforce the joy that people feel to do with that product, then here's your two things that you know is already doing that out in the world, and you can then go back and use the conversation and the context to then begin to frame. Now, I'm not telling you how to write it, I'm just telling you that these things are important to the people that have been using it and the people that are speaking about it on social media. Like I say, I'm not a copywriter at all. What about trust? Do you trust anything on your phone? Probably not. No. So what was coming out was the battery. People liked the battery, they trusted the battery life, and the fact that it would charge again. And then the other one was the screen. Now, I've never used a Samsung before, so I don't know if the screen is any benefit different to anything else.
Just replaced my Samsung phone because I put it in my pocket and it just cracked.
Are you sure that's not an iPhone 6?
So it was only relating to the Samsung phone, or did it relate to anything to do with Samsung?
You can do either. You can do it lots of different ways. So people keep on coming to me and going, I want to know. Well, for instance, there was a travel company again, and they came and they wanted to know what's the best holiday selfie. I'm like, how can I search for the best holiday selfie? People come with really, really crazy things that they want you to do. I say, I don't get all the data that's created. In fact, I phoned DataSift as one of the fire hoses, and I wanted to do something. Someone else asked me, is Twitter a positive place or is it a negative place? I was like, right, okay, we can do that. So I phoned the Twitter fire hose and I said, I really want to know if Twitter's a positive place or a negative place. I need to get data for a day. How much is it going to cost me for data for a day? £4 million. So we took it back. What we did actually is we went back to this, and we went back into how we look at that and took the various phrases from here and put them into Twitter so we could search for those specific keywords. So going back to the Samsung one, is you can search for Samsung in general, you could search for Samsung Galaxy, you can basically search for whatever you want. You could search for love, you could search for hate, and it'll bring back everything relative to that within the given period of time. And then sometimes, like for the indie ref, we've got, I think it's about 4.5 million mentions over like a 2-week period that are sitting there. So you're like, how on earth do you go in and look at that? You need to segment it down because you can't look at 4.5 million mentions altogether. So what was coming out with these ones was the battery and the screen. And then durability, which you're saying no, it's terrible. But other people were saying, so what can happen is you can also have, some of these may also come up in negative connotations to do with that particular brand as well. And then what we would do is we go in and find, okay, so why is this polarised here to being very trustworthy, but it's coming down here and people are getting angry because it's breaking? Maybe there's a certain feature within that that's not actually working properly in certain instances, and maybe a product recall needs to happen. Maybe something. So we go in and we have a look at the underlying reasons for it. We don't just take it as gospel. Sadness. You've been sad with your phones? Just the breaking of it. The handset size. People don't like the bigger handsets. What about anybody else with any other phones? My handset's massive. I don't particularly mind it. And then the other one was the 3G capabilities. I've got an HTC and I've come to London today and I have no 3G here. And I live in the countryside in Scotland and I get 3G there, which is so it's a bit crazy. So taking all of this, now I have to admit this is my favourite. I don't do case studies because case studies are based on somebody else's business, with somebody else's customers, with somebody else's staff, with somebody else's everything else. They're not you. Okay, you can have a look at it to see how they approach, but I wouldn't say let's just take this case study and apply it into our company because it's never going to work. But this is my favourite example of something working. Now, what will happen is, I do not know if they use social intelligence to get to this, but they used a bit of behavioural economics in there, and I would really, really like to have hoped that they did do some research, and they did use a bit of social intelligence in here, so this is why I put it in, but it's one of my favourites. This made me like case studies. So, would you vote to pay a 0.7% tax increase to fund a library? So, when was the last time you were in a library? Anybody in the past week? Quite a few people. So, would you increase your taxes to fund your library? Yeah? Or what about other people? Yes? Right, okay, so maybe the States is slightly different. What was happening here there was a place called Troy in Michigan, and their library had lost its funding. But nobody had really been using it for quite some time. It wasn't as busy as what it used to be, and the council just decided that it didn't really need to be there anymore. So what they were given is that we need this extra 0.7% to fund the library for a 5-year period. Now, for your everyday taxpayer, so they had to go and vote on this to say we're going to raise the taxes to fund the library. So for the general person, there was lots of things that were outcrying, going, no, just I don't want this extra tax increase. Things are tight enough as it is. So what the pro-library people had to do was they had to change the conversation from paying extra money to why we use the libraries. Has anybody seen this case study before? A few people. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So they had to change it. So anybody who's not seen it, how would you approach that? To change it from we need more money from you, just to being completely focused on the library and what the library provides. Nobody? We're going to burn the books. So going back into what I've been saying before, everything that I've said before has been, we need to go and we need to be really relevant to the customer, and sometimes that means talking in their language, and it means going through the emotions that they're going. In this case, it's a complete reversal, and it's been a reversal from what other things that you've heard this morning. So again, going back into that emotion, we need to spark outrage to be able to get these people to act. So what happened was there was lots of tweets going out. They put all these in the ground, and then there was a Facebook campaign and there was a Twitter campaign, and this is the types of things that was coming out. So there's 200,000 books there. Let's close the library and let's burn the books, basically. A lot of people in the local area came back, and they weren't very happy. So what had happened was, now I can't remember the name. This was all run by an organisation, or a supposed organisation, and it was, I can't remember the name of it. It was something like Protecting Families of America, they were called, and they were saying to burn the books. And this is coming back. You people are sick, cheap imbeciles, and this is disgusting, which is really sparking outrage. So what happened was this went on for, I think it was a number of months actually, and then the day before they were due to vote, the company came out and said it was all a joke. We don't really want to burn the books, we really want you to go in and vote for this extra 0.7%. And at the end of it, the library was saved. And it was actually 72% of all the people who voted to pay the extra 0.7%. When they were doing an exit poll, they said that they would actually have paid more money to keep the library after that. But nobody had been engaged with it up until the point where everybody said they were going to burn the books. So that's one of my favourite ones. And like I said, I would like to think that they used a little bit of social intelligence there to go in and find out what's going to irk people if we don't have a library. So going back to the start again, as individuals, we all have an innate desire to connect. Through the work that I do, we try to get people to connect with the language and the emotion and the context. So social intelligence, I'm not telling you how to do it, and I'm not telling you how to write, but it can help position the message. When I left the university and I went into work, sometimes we used to sit and we would get a client brief in, and everybody would sit round about the table and they'd go, right, okay, so we've got £25,000 here, how are we going to spend it? And coming from a rigorous background of what I did, I was like, how you don't know anything about these people. How can you go in and decide that this is what they want, that this is the app that they need to have, that's the message, and you don't know anything about it. So this is where I think that I sit, is within all of that for this particular area. But again, it's you guys that come and make us connect within to that. So I can give you functional building blocks to help you position and get you there, but it comes from your imagination and from your creation to actually make us go and connect with the content. But thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jillian. Any questions for Jillian? Yeah, just here.
Obviously, as you mentioned, the referendum, we're now in the age when I guess every election going forward is going to be covered by social media in the Twitter age. Mm-hmm. To your knowledge, was there any ongoing analysis that was taking place during the referendum to almost, because famously in that election there were no exit polls, Are there any pollsters using Twitter to try and gauge what the likely outcome would be? And was that taking place during the Scottish Indie Ref?
We did a poll, and we're in the process. The data set's the most complicated data set I've ever came across, because there's so many different emotions, and then it tails, because we've got two different sides that are going, yeah, we're going to get it, and we want to be part of it, and the emotions just twist all the way through it. So it's taken us a bit of time to get to where we were. One of the things that we did on the day is we kept a check on the number of people they're saying they've just voted and what they've voted. And what came out is that people who were of a yes vote, it was 5 times more people said that they had voted yes than what they had voted no. But with your conversation to do with this is actually quite interesting. We already kind of knew that it was going to be a no vote. If someone looked at social media and they looked at all the yes, you would just assume, and you would automatically say it's going to be yes, because there's so much noise surrounding this. There's so many different types of people coming into the conversation. But what happens within that, in particular politics, is people don't like to speak their opinion when there's a larger voice that's got something else against it, and they don't even speak to family or friends about it, let alone on social media. So as the hype for the yes was building and building and building, there was a spiral of silence happening with the no vote, and they were becoming pretty quiet. So it's a really interesting data set. It doesn't suggest that there should have been a no vote. There's some figures released after it as well, saying the percentages of the cohort generations that voted yes and voted no. Every single one of them, apart from the 18 to 24s, which was 49% yes and 52% no, and then the over 55s, this is why I don't like numbers, the over 55s were 27% yes and the rest was no, but everything else was more geared towards yes. Which, if you look at it, you go, it should have been a yes vote, but because we've got that ageing population, it became back down to the no vote. But it was a really good. It's really interesting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, near the back, just here.
Hi, it's a cheeky request for a bit of unpaid advice, really. I manage the social communities for 4 major chocolate brands. We've got about 5 million followers in total. I work for an agency. We're their social agency, and although we kind of the audience has grown exponentially, the client themselves is still agnostic about the power of social media. And as they review over the coming months kind of their social media presence, what would be one kind of thing that you could, bit of advice to offer me to tell the clients that the most compelling reason to retain a strong presence on social media?
I think, like I say, everything, I can't give you, I'm an academic, I need to have the data there to be able to tell you. So I would go in and I would understand what that community round about them looks like and what the wider chocolate market looks like, just to see where you're sitting and to see, and then again you can go, well, they're talking about all of this stuff. These are our potential customers, they're there. How are we going to get them? This is what they like, this is what they don't like, and this is what we give, and then marry the two together to be able to go through with that.
I think it goes back to the finance stuff that we talked about earlier in the day. It's we can meet the return on the objectives that we set. It's just that ROI. They're not convinced there's a direct link to the bottom line, which is really, I think it's still in the early days of social media. It's still quite kind of opaque. It's
unless you've had someone go in and actually track it all the way through. It's very difficult for me to answer because I can't see it. One of the things that we can do is we go on brand affinity and things like that as well. And so you've got direct conversation, which is direct to you, and then you've got the indirect stuff. If you take away the direct conversation, then it's all the indirect part that stays. So, for instance, we analysed tenants. And at that point, tenants didn't have a Twitter feed, and we went to analyse what people were saying about tenants. And it was appalling, it was terrible. And it was like children at school sneaking cans in, and then people getting drunk at the weekends and all sorts of different stuff. And as a result of that, they went in and they pay a lot of money now for someone to go in and to do the Twitter feed to try and cull out some of that negative perception, which may help. That is not a numbers thing, but again, it's going back to the brand perception.
Thanks. And just to say, it was really encouraging earlier in the Q&A to hear you guys talk about, you've got your enthusiastic young social media kids, but actually to have experienced kind of writers who understand brand kind of language it was good to hear. That kind of thing was reinforcing what we believed.
Oh, no, that's really good. I've learned quite a lot being here today myself, which is great. Thank you. Any other questions? Yep.
It was interesting to hear you talking about emotion and emotion driving engagement. I wondered if you'd done any more research or had any more insights into whether there were particular kinds of emotion that suited particular kinds of content to drive engagement, and then also from that engagement to drive action. I mean, I've seen some pretty interesting stuff. I don't know if you're aware of it, from Greenpeace, who, as you can imagine, have all kinds of stories they can tell about, you know, the possibility of saving the world or the possibility of the world ending up as a horrible fireball with no polar bears. And the stuff that they could, obviously the stories they could tell could inspire a real range of really strong emotions in the audience. But some of them, even though people might share if they were, you know, or comment or respond or engage if they were, for example, particularly angry. So that's where I was interested in the book burning example. But the one that actually made people engage with the campaign, interestingly enough, going back to your Samsung, was joy. Joy was the one that actually moved people to do something rather than just talk about it. I don't know if you had any more. Yeah,
we're going through quite a big kind of R&D development phase for this particular thing just now. It's something that I want to know, and again, going through different types of communication, if it's on a mobile device or a tablet, or if it's actually on your desktop, and how that then impacts upon it as well. I don't have an answer for you just now. Again, everything that we do is quite experimental, and we're learning constantly all the time, so it's nothing set in stone. Things need to be adjusted slightly for different brands. One of the things that we have been doing is we've been going in to have a look at when the brands communicate, how people are then responding to that. So for instance, if it's within an advertising campaign, have they mentioned a feature or a benefit? Because some brands, people will respond better to a benefit than what they will a feature, and in the reverse as well. So we can take two things. It doesn't really answer your question, but we're moving towards that direction.
I'll watch this space.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? No? Okay, well, can I ask a question?
Yes.
What do you think will happen with Twitter as it develops into the future? If they introduce, they've sort of Facebookified their design, and if they introduce filtered feeds, what difference will that make to the kind of work that you do?
It could make it easier. It depends on how it's going to work. I don't ever use the Twitter interface at all. We use other third-party systems to bring in the data, and then a lot of the time we don't even use them. We run them all off into spreadsheets and then go back through our research grade technologies to find the answers. Right. So it depends on what's available through these the Twitter fire hose, what comes in through the API and what metadata and things like that they give us. Right. But the user experience on Twitter, it may be quite, if they're categorizing, put them into segments, it may be easier for you guys to find information, for the individual user to find relevant information for them, but it shouldn't impact us that much. Right. It's privacy that impacts us. Right. We can't get the data if you're private. Okay. Unless we build an app and you give us permission to take it, of course. So be careful of your apps, and once you've finished using them, delete them so they can't keep on getting your information.
Okay. Okay, I think that wraps it up then. So
thank you.
Big hand for Jillian Ney. Thank you.